You think bedtime stories are for children, but they're actually rewriting your child's identity, one sentence at a time. Because long before the world teaches your child how to perform, it teaches them how to belong. And that first curriculum doesn't come from school, it comes from your breath in the dark, from the rhythm of your voice, from the flicker of a lamp and a story that's been read 100 times and still isn't finished. What you speak into them in those quiet moments doesn't just entertain, it shapes. It becomes memory, and not the kind they can quote, but the kind they feel in their bones when they're alone, when they're afraid, when they're older and can't quite explain why they believe they'll be okay. You're not just reading a story, you're holding a lantern, and every page you turn casts light on the path they'll walk one day, through forests they don't yet know exist. Carl Jung said, "In every adult there is a child, an eternal child. That child still believes in monsters, still fears the dark, still hopes someone will sit beside them and say, 'Once upon a time, so what if the books we think of as bedtime filler were actually ancient blueprints? What if Where the Wild Things Are is a story about shadow integration? What if The Very Hungry Caterpillar is a parable about transformation and self-regulation? What if Max and the caterpillar and the moon Harold draws are not just characters but guides?' Because Max doesn't just get angry, he sails into his rage, he meets it, dances with it, rules over it. And then he returns, not punished, but held, and his supper is still warm. That's not just a resolution, that's a ritual of forgiveness. And the caterpillar, he doesn't just eat, he gorges on everything until he's forced to stop. And then in stillness he changes. That's not digestion, that's death and rebirth, that's metamorphosis. We call these children's books, but they're better described as mythic downloads. They don't teach facts. They build frameworks, they don't explain the world, they initiate the soul, and they don't just shape your child, they reach into you. Because when you speak those words, words someone once read to you, or maybe no one did, you become the guide you were waiting for. You become the one who stays, the one who reads the story even when you're tired. The one who carries the lantern not just for them, but for the child still hiding in your own chest. Khalil Gibran wrote, "Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself." So maybe that's what Storytime really is. Not parenting, but prophecy. Not just a tradition, but a transmission. A sacred act of remembering and relighting. And the next time you read that book, the one they always ask for, the one you've read until the cover curls and the spine splits, try not to rush through it. Because maybe it's not the child asking for it again. Maybe it's the soul whispering, "Read me home," and you're still holding the lantern. We obsess over screen time and sugar, but the real question is, what stories are shaping your child's soul? What ideas are nesting in their inner world? Unspoken, unseen, but unforgettable. This is the realm of the child archetype, not just youth, but pure potential. The untamed self before the mask, the imagination before the rules, the sacred blueprint before the edits, and nothing speaks more fluently to that part of your child than story. Take Harold and the purple crayon. A boy with a crayon draws his way through fear, hunger, confusion, even night. He doesn't wait for rescue. He creates his way forward. He draws doors. He draws solutions. He draws stars when the sky disappears. That's not just creativity, that's archetypal authorship. That's what it means to make meaning in the dark. Or look at Journey by Aaron Becker. A wordless book. A girl draws a door and enters a world that responds to her will. No text, no instruction, just imagination as compass. She isn't told what's possible, she shows us. Children don't analyze these stories, they inhabit them. They feel them before they can explain them. They mimic the characters, they redraw the scenes, they act out the dragons and portals and moons with sticks and shoelaces and bedsheets. And this is how the psyche expands, through symbolic play, through embodied metaphor, through story time that seeps beneath the conscious mind and becomes part of the scaffolding of the self. Rabindranath Tagore once wrote, "Let your life lightly dance on the edges of time like dew on the tip of a leaf. This is the child's genius." And it's the genius that gets crushed when we demand literal comprehension over emotional absorption. We ask, do you understand the story? But the better question is, what part of you felt seen? Because they are the hungry caterpillar, the angry Max, the drawing girl. They are the crayon, the door, the sky itself. And when you read to them, you are helping them gather those fragments. You're giving them mirrors. But here's the paradox no one talks about. You don't have to explain it. You don't even have to believe it. Just being there is enough. The voice, the breath, the page, even if you're distracted, even if you're tired, even if your thoughts are half a world away, you are still performing a kind of magic, because the nervous system of a child doesn't need perfection. It needs presence, it needs repetition, it needs rhythm. The same book, the same line, the same tone, over and over again until safety lives inside the syllables. And when they grow older and the world disappoints them or forgets them or frightens them, they will reach for that rhythm, not consciously, but somatically, in how they speak, in how they hope, in how they love. And maybe, just maybe, they'll pass it on. They'll draw a door of their own. They'll hold a crayon. They'll find a lost child and say, "Come with me. Let me show you where the wild things are." And the lantern, it'll still be burning, because once a child has been seen, truly seen, they don't forget, they remember, and they light the way for someone else. Not all heroes wear capes. Some carry warm soup into dark rooms. Some sit silently beside a child who can't find the words. Some read the same book night after night, even when their voice is fraying. And sometimes the greatest act of strength is simply staying. In Jungian language, this is the mother archetype, not limited by gender or biology. She is the psychic blueprint of nurture, the symbolic womb, the soul's first sense of safety. And when she appears in a child's story, she is not there to explain the world. She's there to hold it together. You see her in The Runaway Bunny, where every attempt to flee is met with a new form of love. If you become a fish, I will become a fisherman. Not to trap, not to teach, just to be near. Just to say, you won't lose me, no matter what you turn into. You see her in Love You Forever, where the lullaby echoes through time, crossing boundaries of age, exhaustion, even reversal, as the son eventually rocks his aging mother. That book doesn't soften the reality of time, it blesses it. These aren't just stories, they are emotional architectures. They whisper to the child, love can stretch, bend, expand, it does not break. They whisper to the parent, your presence is enough. And yet here's the paradox most of us are living. We want so badly to protect our children that we confuse closeness with control. We hover, we correct. We over-sanitize their world to shield them from disappointment, but the soul doesn't grow in padded rooms. It grows in fields where it can fall and rise again. As Montessori said, let the children be free, let them shout and laugh when the sun wakes them, because safety is not the absence of risk, it's the presence of return. What the giving tree teaches, however you interpret its brutal generosity, is that deep love often gives without being asked, and sometimes to a fault, but it leaves a mark, a place to sit down when all else is gone, or take a sick day for Amos McGee, a quiet man who tends to animals with tender routines, and when he falls ill they come to care for him, not with fanfare but with presence, a cup of tea, a soft trumpet tune. And that book, like real life, shows us love echoes, and the science agrees. Oxytocin, our bonding chemical, is released during story time. Eye contact, rhythm and touch literally wire the child's brain for trust. Every time you read, you're not just building vocabulary, you're building relationship. You are becoming the arms they'll imagine returning to when life gets cold, and you don't have to get it perfect. That's the greatest relief of all. You can read the story distracted, you can sigh in the middle, you can forget a page, you can feel like you're failing. But they're not measuring your performance, they're absorbing your consistency. They're learning that even when the day has been loud or harsh or lonely, you still show up with the lantern. You still light the room with the sound of your voice. You still whisper, "You are worth this moment." And they will remember that, maybe not as a quote, but as a core memory. And one day, when they're far from you, when their world feels uncertain, when nothing makes sense, they will hear your voice again, not as words, as presence, and they will know, without understanding how, that they are safe to be themselves, because someone once read them a story and didn't stop when it got hard. We say we want to protect our children from fear, but what if the safest place to meet fear is in a story? Jung called it the shadow, the part of the psyche that holds everything we deny, repress, or hide, not because it's evil, but because it's unaccepted. And children, they feel their shadow before they can name it, the scream that erupts without cause, the silence after a broken toy, the dream they can't explain. So the stories we tell them give form to the formless. The monsters in books are not threats, they're metaphors, and metaphors are how the soul learns to breathe. In The Dark by Lemony Snicket, a boy tiptoes through shadow, afraid of what he can't see. Until the darkness itself speaks, softly, patiently, it guides him, not harms him. And suddenly the thing he feared becomes a companion, a voice, a helper. In Go Away, Big Green Monster, the child builds the monster's face, part by part. Yellow eyes, blue hair, sharp white teeth, and then, one by one, commands it to disappear. That's not just empowerment, that's symbolic mastery. That's a rehearsal for every future panic they'll have to talk themselves down from. And then there's Grover, sweet, lovable Grover, begging you not to turn the page because a monster waits at the end. He builds suspense, he pleads, he panics, and when you finally reach the last page, the monster is him. And the child laughs. Not just because it's funny, because it's true. The monster is never out there, it's in here, in us. And when a child laughs at that, they're not dismissing the fear, they're dissolving its power. Rumi once wrote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." What stories do, when they're honest, is invite the wound to speak. But in modern parenting, we often silence that voice. We sanitize stories, remove the wolves, skip the deaths, avoid the shadows. And in doing so, we send the wrong message, that fear is shameful, that sadness is too heavy, that anger should be hidden. But fairy tales were never meant to be safe, they were meant to be sacred. Bettelheim understood this. He said fairy tales are unrealistic on purpose because they deal with what's emotionally real. The witch isn't just a character, she's abandonment, she's betrayal, she's the terror of being unloved. Children know this. They're not fooled by sugarcoating. They don't need pretty. They need truth, spoken in symbols, cradled in story, held in your voice. And they need to know they're not wrong for feeling big things. So the next time your child asks for the monster book again, for the scary page, the dragon, the darkness, don't skip it. Read it slowly. Pause on the fear. Stay with them, because you're not just reading a story. You're becoming the voice that stands beside them in the woods. You're saying, "I'm not afraid of your fear." You're saying, "You can feel it all and still be safe." And when they grow older and the monsters change shape, become rejection, depression, loneliness, they won't run. They'll remember what you read, they'll face the shadow, and maybe they'll whisper back, "You belong here too." Every child hears two voices growing up. The first says, "Be good." The second whispers, "Be brave." And somewhere between the two, a story unfolds, a story that teaches them who they are before the world decides for them. Jung called it the hero archetype, not the flawless champion, but the one who journeys into the unknown, fails, adapts, and returns with something real: courage, wisdom, identity. But here's what we often forget. The hero doesn't start with strength. The hero starts with fear, and the earliest place children learn to face it is story time. In The Little Engine That Could, a small train looks up at an impossible hill. Everyone else has failed. She's too small, too untested. but she repeats a phrase like a sacred mantra, "I think I can." That isn't optimism, it's defiance, and every time a child hears it, they practice the internal voice they'll one day need when no one else believes in them. Or take the dot, where a girl believes she can't draw, so she makes a single mark, just a dot, and her teacher reframes it, "Sign it." That permission changes her life. One small action, witnessed with reverence, becomes the doorway to confidence. These aren't stories about winners, they're stories about becoming. And then comes the trickster, the one who doesn't follow the map but redraws it in "Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus." The pigeon pleads, bargains, tantrums. Children laugh, but they're not just amused. They're learning. They see their own impulses mirrored and exaggerated. And through humor, they begin to self-regulate. The pigeon doesn't behave, but neither do emotions. And learning to love something unruly is the first step in learning to love yourself. Or consider the true story of the three little pigs. The wolf tells his side. "A sneeze," he says, "not malice, just a cold." Suddenly, the villain becomes relatable. The truth becomes a perspective. The child learns to question what they're told, to think, to empathize, to listen between the lines. This is the trickster's gift. Not chaos, but expansion. Because not all problems are meant to be solved. Some are meant to be reimagined. Jung understood this. He said the creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct. That instinct is sacred. When children build castles out of mud, when they invent new rules to a game, when they tell a joke that no one understands but them, they're not wasting time. They're training their psyche for adaptability. But we often interrupt this process. We rush them back into structure. We praise the hero, but mistrust the fool. And in doing so, we risk raising children who can follow, but not create. Here's the paradox. The stories that look the silliest often carry the greatest truth, because when a child laughs, their brain opens, their defenses drop. And that's when the lesson slips in, not as dogma, but as discovery. You see it in Iggy Peck, architect. A boy obsessed with building is discouraged by a rigid teacher, but when the class faces danger, Iggy's passion becomes their salvation. His weirdness becomes their bridge, literally. The message isn't just follow your dreams, it's the world may mock your gift until it needs it. And that's the story every child is waiting to hear. Not how to succeed, but how to stay themselves when the world misunderstands them. So when you read these stories, you're doing more than entertaining. You're placing tools into their imagination. You're giving them models of persistence, of invention, of defiant joy. And one day, when the road feels too steep, or the rules feel too rigid, or the story everyone else is telling doesn't make sense, they'll remember the little train, the pigeon, the dot, and they'll whisper, "I think I can," not because they're certain, but because once someone read them a story where doubt wasn't the end, it was the beginning. Every story ends, but not all stories leave. Some settle into the soil of the psyche. They take root, they bloom years later in moments of silence or suffering or strength. These are the stories that become part of you, and they're rarely the loud ones. More often, they're soft, like the Velveteen Rabbit, where a toy becomes real not through perfection, but through love. Through wear, through loss. The rabbit doesn't earn his realness, he endures it, and by the end, he's threadbare, but alive. That's not a children's story, that's a parable of the soul, or the rainbow fish, a creature made of shimmering scales alone in his brilliance. Only when he begins to share, one scale at a time, does he find connection, not by dimming his light, but by letting others hold it. These stories don't resolve problems, they reveal identities. And as Jung taught, the goal of life is not to become good, but to become whole. Wholeness means loving the wildness, the fear, the generosity, the doubt, the monster, the trickster, the child, the caregiver, the one who builds, the one who breaks. And at the center of it all, the self, the integrated soul. That's what all these stories have been pointing toward. And maybe, just maybe this whole time, you weren't just reading to your child. You were reading to the child inside you, the one who still wants to believe that monsters can be named, that anger can be danced with, that love can outlast failure. And if you've ever wondered whether story time really matters, remember this. The stories you repeat become the inner narrator your child hears for life. And the story you choose to pass down becomes the one they'll whisper to themselves when the world forgets who they are. Rumi said, "Don't get lost in your pain. Know that one day your pain will become your cure." This is the gift of stories. They hold the pain gently until it's ready to become medicine. So now we end, not with a moral, but with a mirror. What story saved you? What line stayed in your bones? Tell us in the comments. Maybe your memory is the lantern someone else is waiting for. And if this video opened something in you, share it. Subscribe. You're not alone. The story isn't over. It's just beginning again. In the voice of a parent, in the heart of a child, in the silence after the last page is turned, where the lantern still glows, waiting to be passed on.